Good morning. Welcome to the session on causation and the mental. My name is Bernie Kobus. It's a privilege for me to be here to pay my respects to Al Plantinga, my undergraduate teacher from Calvin College days, where I double majored in Alvin Plantinga and Paul Zwier. I was much taken with Al's intellectual brio, his humor, his lack of pretension, his independence of mind, his sheer cool. I was a teenager at the time. He opened up for me a world of philosophical discovery and delight, the thrill of which has never, for me, since been equaled. So thank you, Al. And I'm pleased to note that Al tells me one of his post-retirement projects is to teach a few courses at Calvin College. Our main speaker today is Peter van Inwagen, the John Cardinal O'Hara Professor of Philosophy here at the University of Notre Dame. His paper is titled Causation and the Mental, and Robin Collins, Distinguished Professor of Philosophy at Messiah College, will comment.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me all right? So I'm going to begin with an anecdote that will illustrate what the extraordinary nature, the almost inconceivable nature of this occasion. To understand the anecdote, you have to know that Mike Lux and I are almost exactly the same age, and both of us are almost exactly 10 years younger than Al. So at one point, Mike Lux and I were discussing our strategy for hiring a new metaphysician in the department. This was, in fact, the period that eventuated in the hiring of Mike Ray. And Mike Lux said to me, "We have to hire someone, Peter, that's much younger than you and I are. We don't want to hire somebody our age, because what's going to happen if we all die and retire at once? Then there wouldn't be anybody here doing metaphysics but Al." Well, the presupposition is that this event could never happen. And I have to agree that it was a reasonable presupposition, and yet, like many things in life, unbelievable as they are, you have to accept them like a giraffe, because they're right there before your very eyes. Okay, I'm going to talk about some issues in the philosophy of mind. It's not so much a paper in the philosophy of mind, which Al has written little on, but what he has written is significant. It's more a metaphysician's foray into the philosophy of mind, and I think you'll see that much of this metaphysics, if in form, if not in content, owes a great deal to Al. So, I have some rather extreme ideas about ontology. And when I say this, I'm not alluding to the ideas about tables and chairs and organisms that the phrase Van Inwagen's extreme ideas about ontology would no doubt suggest to many philosophers. I'm alluding rather to certain ideas I have that belong to the most abstract and the most abstruse part of ontology, the part that pertains to the concepts of substance and attribute and the relations between them. I have some very odd ideas about causation, and notice that I distinguish the extreme from the very odd in the realm of ideas, and some very odd ideas about the relation between the mental and the physical, or perhaps I should say about the traditional opposition between the mental and the physical, since the phrase, the relation between the mental and the physical, suggests something having to do with causation. And the odd ideas I'm alluding to are not ideas about the way the mental and the physical are causally related. What I want to do is to try to put my extreme ideas about ontology together with my odd ideas about causation and my odd ideas about the mental and the physical, and to see what emerges. To try to see whether my ideas about the abstract and the concrete, my ideas about causation, and my ideas about the mental and the physical opposition have, as it were, a vector sum. And of course, I'm particularly interested in the question whether this sum, this issue, whatever one wants to call the result of putting ideas about disparate subject matters together, has any implications in the matter of mental causation, any implications about how to answer traditional philosophical questions about the causation of the mental by the physical, and the causation of the mental by the mental, and the causation of the mental by the physical. In the end, it will transpire that I do have some rather odd ideas about how the mental and the physical are causally related, but these ideas will figure in what I'm going to say as conclusions, not premises. So let's start with my extreme ideas about ontology. The world, I say, divides into abstract and concrete objects. Everything is either abstract or concrete, and nothing is both. No idea how to define that distinction. You know, in the written version, I look at the possible definition in terms of causal, that is, abstract objects are objects that are incapable of entering into causal relations. To me, I've always said that's a definition like, say, X is a word if and only if X has a spelling. Maybe it's extensionally right, but it doesn't seem to get at the essence of the matter. I just don't know how to define it, though I think it's one who admits that there are objects of both kinds understands, even if one is hard put to it to give a Chisholm-style definition. So if there are abstract and concrete objects, what abstract and concrete objects are there? Well, in my view, the only concrete objects are substances, and the only abstract objects are relations. That is, relations in intention. I include in the category of relation one place or unary relation, that is, properties or attributes or qualities, and zero place relations or propositions. Here I'm skipping a paragraph. And what about substances? I can't really tell you what substances are. That is to say, I don't know how to tell you which concrete things are substances and which are not. And my reason for this is that I can't see how anything could manage to be a concrete thing but avoid being a substance. Anyone who thinks this, that this can be managed, seems to think something like this. Some concrete things more fully realize the idea of being a real thing than other concrete things do. The concrete things that most fully realize this idea are the substances. Here are some things that many people think exist and think are concrete rather than abstract, and which, they say, despite their existing, do not manage to be fully real. Artifacts, severed limbs, sticks and stones, holes, cracks in a vase, say, surfaces, waves, reflections, and shadows. There would be some tendency on the parts of some philosophers to say that artifacts, severed limbs, sticks and stones are incomplete or defective substances, and that holes and cracks and waves and reflections and shadows are not even that. They are mere modes of substance. I can only say that I don't really understand any of this. I can't grasp the idea of one thing's being more real than another, much less the idea of something's not being a real thing at all. I don't deny that real is a very useful word, but I don't think its purpose is to mark out boundaries between classes of things. So far as I can see, if there were artifacts and severed limbs and waves and the rest, they would be as real as anything could be and would therefore be substances. Now, I in fact don't think that there are any such things as these, but that's another story. All right, there are the concrete things, the substances. There are the abstract things, the propositions, properties, and proper relations. Proper relations means binary, ternary, so on. How are these two classes of things, the abstract and the concrete, related to each other? Well, let's look at a simple case, a case that will perhaps serve further to explain how I look at abstract things. Let's consider someone's sky blue scarf. Well, of course, I don't believe there are any scarves, but probably you do, and I'm willing to tailor my examples to the audience. In any case, I think there probably are some sky blue things, some birds maybe, or something like that. They would serve as an example as well. So here we have a substance and an attribute, the color sky blue and the scarf. I first note that the attribute is a universal. It's had by the scarf, but it's had by lots of other things as well. And all the properties and relations that I speak of are universals, with the possible exception of Hexeides. individual